So I found an axe head, which I often do. It's interesting how people throw these things away and they just sit out in the mud and the dirt and nobody claims them for years and years. The handle just rots away and you've got this old piece of steel. Clearly somebody has been using this to pound wedges, and that will require a bit of grinding. But you know, for the most part, this axe head's in pretty good shape and it needs a new home. So I got lots of long-handled axes. This is a fairly hefty axe. I got this short one here, which is also in need of this is more of a hatchet. It's also in need of a new handle. So what I'm doing today, and I've showed this on a few of my videos before, is I'm making a new handle for this axe head. So once I get the head fitted to the wood, then I'll finish off the rest of the handle. Notice how the grain is about as straight up and down as I can get it. You don't want the grain going crossways. And I always fit the head first before I do anything else, because if you screw up the head, then you know, the top of the handle, then the rest of the handle becomes a waste of time. It's a whole lot easier to do the rest of the handle than it is to fit this head. So what I do to start off with is I cut it flat, so I've got a nice smooth surface to work with. Then I put the axe head on top of the wood, and with a pencil, I very carefully scribe around the inside of the eye of the axe. And that gives me something to work up to. Then as I'm cutting, I put the axe head on, and I tap it down until I start getting lines in the edges and areas where it's abrading. So it's still pretty rough around here. A little rough in here. I got a ways to go, and really rough down here. I also scribe a line that becomes the end of where my axe head is going to end up. So I get this axe head, and I want it to protrude just a hair up on the top. I like them sticking up just a little tiny bit. And so I got a lot more sculpting in this area. I did all this with the draw knife. And next step, I'm going to get out the spoke shave. So it's off to the toolbox. I love this toolbox. And when I work with this toolbox, I feel like I've got magic that's going to happen. So today, I'm going to go to my favorite spoke shave. This is an ancient spoke shave. And I was told it was from the late 1700s. It was gifted to me by an old woman whose husband had died. She didn't have anybody else in the family that was even interested in it. And she told me the history of this, that this was her great-grandfather's spoke shave. I guess the BVO or BYO were his initials. You know, it's always interesting whenever I find a tool that has somebody's initials either stamped into it or carved into it. It tells me a couple of things. First off, this was a really important tool and he did not want it to go missing. So he labeled it as his own. But it also tells me a little bit about the pride of ownership of some of these tools. This tool has just got a feel to it like no other spoke shave. I mean, look at this, I've got all these metal spoke shaves here. I've got another wooden spoke shave here, which works fine, but this one's a little bit cruder. It's still quite old, but let's see, does this one have any initials on it? No, nobody even bothered with initials for this one. Oh, wait a minute, there we go. They put it on the metal. M. Gates. So somebody was proud of this spoke shave. This one dates back to the 1800s. It's it's still quite old. It's got a nice shape to it. This one is adjusted by tapping, whereas this older one actually has set screws that you can pull up and down. I like this one because I can set it to a super fine shaving if I want to. This one over here works as well, but you've got to constantly be tapping it for different sizes. So let's get to work. So after marking this, I'm ready to do a little bit of work with the spoke shave. which is a lot more delicate than a draw knife. A draw knife is really aggressive, but a spoke shave, you can do lots of little tiny easing cuts and get right to the point of where you want your work to end up. And it doesn't take that long, you know? If you've never refitted one of your tools with a handle, I highly recommend you try it for a couple of reasons. One, you can fit it to your own hand. Two, there's something very satisfying about making a tool handle that you're working with and holding on to and using, because if you make that tool handle yourself, it's got a feel to it that it's kind of hard to explain, but you know, the look and the feel of a handmade handle is far better than anything you can buy in the store. Plus, you can give it a better finish. Not that you can't, you know, take a existing handle to the sander and work it and, you know, apply whatever kind of a final finish on it that you want to. By doing it by hand, I'm using an axe head on an axe head, which is really not the way to go, because you don't really want to be hitting hardened steel on hardened steel. And that's what was happening down here. It was probably a sledgehammer or another axe, or more than likely, this was hitting a splitting wedge in the stump. But I'm tapping it lightly to get the fit. And then tapping it lightly to get it off. I don't want to jam it all the way down in there, because as you can see, I've got all the marks for the next step of working with the spoke shave. It's really easy, you can see them. Now, when you're fitting a tool like this, you remember you're going to have to cut a slot in the end of this so that it'll house your wedges. So if you make it far too tight, then it's not going to expand on the wedges. A little bit down here. Open it up just a hair more. A little deeper cut. Now, a spoke shave is a tool that you can buy new. They're actually quite pricey, but they're often available at flea markets or, you know, secondhand auctions on tool selling sites on the internet. So I think I'm really, really close. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take it over to the bandsaw. I could use a handsaw, but I've got the bandsaw all set up over there. But cut my slot all the way down. So I did one last fit, and it's pretty close. Little tiny gap over here, which will spread as soon as I cut this bandsaw slot in it. I did remark it down here because I cut off the old mark with the spoke shave. But remember, this part of the axe goes down. And I'm going to polish this up and clean it up and grind these off and make this a suitable looking axe. Hate to put all the work into making a new handle and have the axe head itself look like crap. So I've got the end of my handle shaped quite nicely. And I want you to notice that I squared up the edges of my blank so that when I cut this slot in here, I can just set it down flat on the bandsaw and put my line through the middle and follow it, and it'll take me all the way up to the the mark which I've taken off here. I'll have to remark this again for the distance on the head of the axe. So now comes the fun part. I get to sculpt this so that it fits my hand. And I started off with kind of a wide feel to it because you can always take off more, but you can't put it back. So at this point, I'm going to go back to the great big draw knife. And you have to be careful when you're using a draw knife because it's really easy to go the wrong direction on the grain, and if you get some cross grain, it can actually run out on you. So I'm kind of experimenting with it right now and just taking small cuts. The bevel down makes less aggressive, more controlled cuts. If the bevel is up, it's very, very aggressive. And I'm finding I kind of like it this way a little bit better. Now, if I wanted to, I could run this over to my router table and put a round over a bit, but that would say, okay, then that's the exact shape of what my hand is going to be. I like to kind of keep working it slowly and getting a feel for it as I'm working along. Now, you can design the shape of your handle any way that you like. I like a little bit of a bulge up here that kind of stops my hand when I chuck up on it. And sometimes I like to leave a little flare at the bottom here. So that's not critical. That's all kind of in the design phase of it. You know, years ago, farmers all had a shaving horse in their barn, and they made most of their handles. They'd either break them or they'd buy them without handles. Or like me, they'd find an old tool and rehandle it. So the nice thing about making your own handle is you can fit it to your own hand. That still feels a little uncomfortable to me, so I'm going to narrow this down just a bit more. But if you can kind of keep playing with it a little bit, you can get that feel where it just feels right. And you can switch directions. You know, you can push it down on one side and then come up to it. Like I said, if I want to leave a little bit of a flare on the bottom, getting there, closer, a little bit sharp on the bottom edge here. Now I could chuck this in my shaving horse, which is outside, but it's a rainy day and it's cold outside, and I just want to work them in here. So here is my roughed out handle. I still have to take it to the sander, and it's got a nice feel all the way down. I set it so it fits my hand really, really well. And when I sand it up and oil it up, it's going to be great. I like it so that when I chuck up on it, I don't come all the way up to the axe head. So I like to kind of give this area a little bit more width to it. And that's where I'm at. Okay, I finished the sanding. I didn't show you the sanding because watching somebody sand is like watching paint dry. But I wanted you to take notice of the grain on the bottom of this, which runs straight through. That's the strongest direction for any kind of a wooden hand tool. If the grain was the other way, it would fracture much easier. And that's what it's going to look like. Now I've got to take the head over and process that. Notice I haven't put the wedge in yet. I've got it so it slips on. When I wedge it nice and tight, it'll be good. I like the fit of this. It's a heavy head, which is going to be mostly for splitting wood up tight and close. I'm not going to be able to take a really big swing with this, but I wanted more weight than a hatchet. So this will be for my wood pile. So I cleaned up the axe head, took it to the sander, put a good sharp edge on it, and I'm about ready to mount it. Final touch. Always oiling the project. Or finishing it, however you want to finish it. I like oil. And there it is, my maker's mark. I like it. Now I guess I got to go split some wood after it dries.